So love first. In a sense, all the others flow from love and fall under love. Remember last week in chapter 5, verse 6, Paul said, the only thing that really counts in this life is faith expressing itself through love. See, when you have faith, faith energizes love. Faith brings love to life. So a life of faith in Jesus is a life of love. Paul goes on to say that love was what God was shooting for with the Old Testament law. The entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. See, the law all along was for love. The law was there for the benefit of your neighbor, not for yourself. But people used it selfishly as a proud way of proving themselves. And so they emptied the law of its value, love. The law for serving yourself isn't working out in love. But faith in Jesus works itself out in love. By faith in Jesus, we become free from the law, but we're bound to love. So we keep the law anyway. So love was the way for God's people in the Old Testament. Love is the way for God's people in the New Testament. If you are one of God's people, is love how you sum up your life? Well, we really need to think about what love is. It's so big that it can be hard to bring down to earth. And there's hundreds of verses in the New Testament about love. But a very important and central passage on love is 1 John 4. So we're going to read that quickly. 1 John 4 from verse 7. It'll be on the screen. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. So just three things for us to know about love from this passage. First, love comes from God because God is love. It's his very nature and being. Everything he says and does is an expression of love. It's who he is. When he has justice and anger, they never come apart from his love. He is love through and through. Before the universe was made, was love, was God. See, our world today has got it in reverse. We don't believe in God, so it's not God is love, but love is God. So love becomes our guiding rainbow for what is good and permissible. But the problem is, without God, how do we know what love is? It becomes a feeling, subjective, and it's boiled down to tolerance, acceptance, or whatever feels good. And this leads to a world of problems, because there is a God and he objectively gives us love. He is love. Second, love is divide crossing, sacrificial giving, exemplified by Jesus. See, Jesus is God, is love. When we see Jesus, we see love in action. Verse 10, God sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. While we were his enemies, it's not that we loved God. Jesus came and crossed the divide for his enemy. He loved me and gave himself for me. See, love isn't a feeling, it's a committed demonstration. It's a costly sacrifice, even for an enemy. It's giving that hurts. For Jesus, it was his whole life, taking the weight of God's anger for sin. thinking of myself, I tend to do costly sacrifice for those I really care about, and maybe nice things for the rest. We might give a kidney for a brother or a sister, or put ourselves in debt with a large sum of money for a desperate child. But for everyone else, maybe I just give some time or a small gift from my surplus. True love, though, seen in Jesus, crosses the divide. It's painful giving for the sake of the other. Third, our love is only God in us. If we love one another, it's only because God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. If you don't love, you show that you don't know God. In just the chapter before this, John says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? And the answer John expects is the love of God cannot be in that person. We can't claim to love God or to have God's love in us if we don't help the needy when we are able. Well, we might claim to have love, but John says we'd be lying. So again, from chapter 4, whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. But when you do love, as God's people will by his Spirit, when we do love, God is seen in us because God is love. See the extraordinary statement at the end of verse 12 in the passage we read, 1 John 4 verse 12. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, he's saying that because love is who God is, and because God is in us growing love, if people see our love, they see God. As I thought about this, I think we tend to protect ourselves here. Have you done what I've done? I hear myself saying on many occasions, often to people who are disgruntled about church, well, don't look at me or don't look at Christians, look at Jesus. But am I just excusing myself and us, the church, from the kind of love God expects from us? The kind of love that makes him known. According to John, the world should be able to look to Christians and churches and see God. There is a God when people look at us. By this you will know you're my disciples, Jesus said, by your love for one another. And that is the kind of love that God is producing in us by his Spirit.